please join me in welcoming America's sweetheart, Adam Rippon. So Adam, it's been a pretty busy couple years for you, huh?
Yeah, and it's all led me to this Google Talk. Which is pretty
It's
awesome.
the culmination of everything.
Yeah,
so that's
it is.
amazing.
It is.
Yeah. What prompted you to write a book after all these adventures that you've been going on for the past couple years?
A lot of people have asked, why did I write a memoir at like 29? And because I fucking can. The long form answer would be that at this point in my life, I felt like I was ending one chapter and beginning another. And I learned so much about myself, and I went through so many different kinds of scenarios that I wanted to share those. So the book highlights a lot of the moments in my life where like I wasn't at my best, and I felt like maybe I was a failure. And I wanted to share those because in those moments, that's when I learned the most about myself.
So I enjoyed your book so much. You had me at basically the first line of the book, which I'm going to quote. The first time I went ice skating, I absolutely fucking hated it. That really resonated with me because that was my experience as well. I fell on the ice and I broke my ankle. I'm like, I'm never doing that again.
You broke your ankle?
I broke my ankle, yeah. And I was like...
Is that why you wear these now?
Yeah, they provide extra support.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I had to have people lift me off the ice and carry me off, and it was really embarrassing.
Standard.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm never doing that again. I think that's why I don't have an Olympic medal right now.
I didn't want to rub salt in the wounds. Yeah.
But I'm curious, after that initial bad experience, what made you come back to it and keep going?
Well, so I'm from northeastern Pennsylvania, so it's like super cold in the winter. I would go skating, and the first time I did not like it at all. And then I somehow got tricked into going to someone's birthday party, which was at a local rink that was just being built. And I had already forgotten about this one experience of where I just didn't like skating. And I went, and I had this amazing time. And I kept asking my mom to please bring me back to the rink. And finally, my mom signed me up for these group classes and as a birthday present.
Wow.
That could have been you.
Yeah, that could have been me. I could have kept at it.
It was, you got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
So I think what really struck out for me when I was reading the sections of your early years, I think a lot of people are under probably the misconception that being a professional figure skater is super glamorous and it's all wearing the slutty bird costume as you were talking about and going out on the ice and performing for thousands of people. And then you get stuffed animals and flowers thrown at you and all that other sort of stuff. But it's actually a pretty grueling, life, and also kind of financially precarious at times too, right?
Being an Olympic athlete is just going after that dream is something that can be really emotionally and financially draining. It's a really tough thing to do, and especially with figure skating, it's one of those sports where you see the culmination of a lot of work, but in 7 minutes over the course of 2 days, and then you go back to this cold, freezing rink, where I trained. What's a Whole Foods but not as nice here in the area? Shots?
Shaws.
Shaws.
Yeah.
It was like an old Shaw's, right? And so here I am training in Long Beach at an old Shaw's, and that's what the building was. It was it was old, it was freezing, and that's where I spent all of my time. And then that culminates in me wearing slutty mesh at the Olympics for everybody to see. But what you don't see are those hours and hours of work and preparation that go into that. Did you think I was a slut overnight?
Takes years, right?
Yes.
To have that moment.
I'm still refining the craft. Yeah.
What really struck out to me too is that your mom was there throughout that whole beginning phase where you're preparing, and that seemed like a really positive relationship for you, but also somewhat strained at times. You have a parent who's not just your parent, but also your manager and sort of your patron too, handling all the finances. And the parts that I thought were really funny of the story were just, you like battling with your mom over Instagram, that sort of stuff, like who has control over your career on like every little micro detail. So what was that like, just navigating those sort of relationships, dealing with family and balancing that with all of your ice skating?
Yeah. It was awesome. No, it was, there were times, where I felt like my mom was, micromanaging everything that I did, because she was doing that. And there's this like fine balance of trying to be a mom and a manager. And here's the thing. In skating, there's no, you don't get recruited to go to a team and work with a coach, and then you're on this team and then you can get drafted to another team. There's none of that. The person who picks the coach that you're with and who is going to trust that person's experience is somebody who is your parent and has no knowledge or any clue of what they're doing. So you're asking somebody who doesn't know what they're doing to make these huge, like, life-defining and career-changing decisions. So, I mean, it's the blind leading the blind. So how does someone who has no knowledge of what they're doing make a decision, and then the other person making the decision is a 10-year-old? It sounds like, that you're set up for disaster. And then on top of that, your parent is also the person who is going to financially help you get through all of these challenges. There's no sponsors, there's no anything until you get to the highest level. It's always like, you have to pay for everything and everything and everything. And when you finally can afford it yourself, people are like, oh, it's free for you. And you're like, why wasn't it free when I needed it? And it can be really grueling. And I think that it was just a balance. And I finally got to this point where I was like, I need to try and do this on my own. And if I can't do it, if it never happens, that's okay. But at least I'm not going into every event feeling like I've put my family at a disadvantage because of my own mistakes. So I tried to kind of handle and tackle all of those things on my own.
Right, and that leads into the book, like the period of time where you go it alone and you're eating green apples, I think, for a month and couch surfing. What was that like, just those first days of that?
So when I first moved to California, which was like 7 years ago, I moved to this small like mountain town. It was called Lake Arrowhead. No one from Lake Arrowhead. So I told everybody, I was like, yeah, LA, because it was like the initials. And I was like, nobody needs to know the details. So I'm living in LA, and because it's like this little mountain town, it's like a vacation spot. There's no apartment for me to find, and if there were, I probably couldn't afford it anyway. So my coach said that I could live in his basement. Glamorous. And I lived in his basement. And the limited amount of money that I had was from a little bit of funding through like U.S. Olympic Committee and U.S. Figure Skating, and that was enough to cover like my training expenses, so like my ice time, and pay my coach a little bit, and then costumes and other like miscellaneous expenses that pop up for an athlete. And one of those was like being a member of the gym, because it was like I need to go to the gym. That's one of my like it's a deal breaker if I don't have enough money to go to the gym. That didn't leave a lot of like wiggle room for like groceries, but I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. And I found this flawless like plan. I concocted this plan that in the gym they had this big basket of like apples, and they had like Tazo tea. So I was like broke as fuck, but I was drinking like $5 Starbucks tea and having like green apples all the time. So basically I like hijacked the whole like gym.
And that lasted for how long exactly?
That was about like the first 6 months that I lived in California.
And then you had grocery money after that, or?
Yeah, well, then it was like, I'm definitely not gonna get scurvy. And I'm I'm very hydrated.
2 thumbs up, great, yeah. So that sort of brings you to the period where I think the 2014 Olympics are coming up, and that's sort of like the first, I guess that's like sort of like, that's supposed to be your time, right? Like everything is preparing for that. So I'm reading along, and then it all sort of falls apart at the last minute. What was that experience like? It must be like really, really fraught when you're preparing for something that happens only once every 4 years, and like everyone's telling you this is your moment, and then to perform under that kind of pressure?
I think like when everyone's telling you it's your moment, I was like the loudest voice telling myself that you know, in 2014 I was 24. That's, you know, if you haven't made it to the Olympics yet in figure skating at 24, it's like to maybe hang them up. Like you know, it's not like you got it. Keep going into your 30s. You know, look around. Everyone's 15. You know, none of the girls have had a period yet. You are fine. You are absolutely fine. Everyone's graduated college and you didn't go yet. But like, I think you are on a gap year. So it's not like I'm still young. You're like, no, And so I felt like at 24, it's like my last time to ever go after this experience, because at 28, maybe I could go again, but I'm not going to go for the first time. It's, you know, not reasonable. And I then not making the team felt like, you know, I had missed out on this once in a lifetime opportunity. I failed. And I felt like my identity was so intertwined with needing to be an Olympian, and if I wasn't, I was a failure. Like, there were only two options for me. And in those moments, I just didn't feel like I was good at anything else other than skating. And then I also didn't feel very good at skating. So it was like, what am I? Time to go back to the shifts. Is that the grocery store?
Shaw's.
Shaw's.
But close enough,
okay. Yeah. You get it. You get the sentiment. Go with me. Oh my God, no, okay.
So you got, I think, the flu or something like that, like a week before the trials.
I know. What a like bitchy thing to say though. Like, I got the flu. But I really did. I was like really sick, so don't judge.
So
Sanders, here's the other thing I'll tell you.
Okay.
I also like was kind of fat, and it was like the flu really should have been the thing that helped me, and it didn't. And so now I can just throw it all on the flu. Mm-hmm. No, I just wasn't in great shape.
So it didn't work out, but everybody's like, oh, you should go it again. You should do it again. Like, where did you find that sort of resolve to give it another shot? Like, knowing that it was like 4 years away and that you would be preparing for 4 years for something that potentially could not pan out again.
I had to take it year by year, because this time nobody was saying like you should do it again. They were like focused on the younger kids coming up who it was, you know, going to be their time. And I get that. I mean, I remember being young and seeing somebody who was 25 and was like, they are so old. And I was just thinking that, you know what, I just felt like somewhere inside me there was still more to do, and I could give more in this like arena of my life. And I decided that I was going to do this one last competition. It was the nationals right after, our national championships right after the Olympic Games. And it was the next year, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to just train harder than I've ever trained before. I'm gonna do it my way, and if, you know, I get 10th, I'm gonna be the best 10th place skater from a national championships that ever has fucking lived, ever. And people will talk like, did you see Adam Rippon? That was the best 10th place finish. And I was like, that's all that, like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna give it my all. And I remember I go into that competition and I skate really well in the short, and I end up 5th. And I was like, I don't feel like I should have been 5th. And I felt like it was a lot of people who were judging me. It was their way of saying like, here's a little bit, but like, we're not gonna push you. You don't deserve it. Like, you missed your chance. And you know, you haven't been skating well the whole season. We're not going to reward you for not showing up when you needed to. And I felt like I was being kind of asked to leave gracefully. And I was like, that's not right. And then I remembered saying that, you know what, I said if I ended up 10th, I would be the best 10th place, whatever. So if this is the same result tomorrow, then fuck it. Like, that's what it is. And so I went in and I skated another really, probably one of the best performances I ever had. And I was in 1st. Like, I just had gotten all of these extra points that like I had needed to make up. And I'm like, I'm gonna do it. Like, this is a fairy tale. And you know, the last person goes out and they skate well. They get second in the free skate, but they win overall. So I'm like, even in my fairy tale, like I'm coming up short. And then I realized that like I still felt like a winner. Even if I wasn't the champion, I was the winner. Like I was the one who I felt so proud of. Like that's what really mattered to me. Yeah, the person who won, they deserved that. But it didn't take anything away from me. And I always felt that like, you know, if somebody had something, it meant less for me, and that wasn't the case, and it took that moment for me to realize that.
That was a turning point where it was more about just doing your best and doing it for you rather than like wherever you're hierarchically ranked among other skaters.
Well, it was just such a surreal and bizarre moment where I was like, I could feel like a winner, and I could look to the champion and be actually really happy for them because I knew the work that they put in, because I had just been so focused on doing what I could do to the best of my ability, and I did that. And I'm sure that they were focused on that too, and you know, of course they were so nice and kind, and you know, they won. And I just was really happy for that person because I know the work that they put in, but I was also happy for myself, and I didn't feel like I wasn't being a good competitor or a fighter because I was happy for someone who did better than me.
So that you basically put yourself back in the running that year, and then the next year at nationals. And that brings me to like the point of the book that I felt was the most poignant, where you're in the running for the Olympics and you're making the decision whether or not to come out. And I want to read a quote because I thought that was sort of like a really, really beautiful moment in the book. You're talking about your mom here. My mom was scared for me to come out for the same reasons she was before. She didn't want this to be the one thing that kept me from making the Olympics. I decided that if this was the thing that would keep me off an Olympic team, then so be it. Coming out was more important to me. It was bigger than me. It was for that insecure little boy in Scranton I had been so many years ago, and all the other insecure little boys out there who I could help. And I thought that was such a beautiful sentiment. And I just wanted to know what was going through your head at that moment, and how you came to that final conclusion.
Well, in 2014, the Olympics were in Russia, and right before the games, there was this anti-gay propaganda law, which we didn't really know what it meant, but it was the first time that I felt like, you know, I possibly could be prosecuted for being just myself, and it didn't feel fair. And, you know, I came out in my early 20s, and so I remember thinking about, like, you know, if I was going to come out or what I was actually feeling. And I looked to a lot of people who shared their stories and their experiences. And I wanted to be able to do the same. So after not making the Olympic team, I didn't say anything, but it wasn't a big deal. I didn't end up going. I decided that, you know what, this is something that's really important to me. But this is before that competition I just talked about where I had this like amazing skate. So I said, you know what, if this is something I really want to do, I need to be in really, really good shape. I need to be like in the best shape of my life. I need to be like this amazing representative of like my community. Because I was like, I can be gay, but I can't be gay and bad at what I'm doing. Like, I'm gay and kind of fat and not good. I was like, I wanna be like in the, I wanna be at my best when I do this. And so I decided that I was, after this national championship where I did really well, I was doing an interview for this small like skating magazine that goes to all the skaters. And I said I wanted to talk about my coming out experience because that was a big turning point in my life and as an athlete. And I spoke to the journalist and she said, okay. And I said, I just want it like tucked in the story. Like I'm gonna talk about it. I want you to just include it and breeze right over it like, you know, anything else, because that's what it was for me. So I did, and she did that, and I wasn't a national champion yet. I wasn't an Olympian yet, so, you know, it took a few weeks for people to have the magazine to even read that it happened, and when they did, they were like, oh. So it wasn't a big deal to anybody, and it wasn't a big deal to me, but it was really important to me that I was able to do that. And then in the long run of then being an out athlete and then eventually making an Olympic team, it turns into a bigger deal.
Yeah, I want to thank you for doing that. Just doing that makes such a huge difference for people. It makes it easier for me and for all the tons of other people to be out on a daily basis, just having people to look to. So I remember when I was younger, there were, I can't even think of any out male athletes. Greg Louganis maybe, that was about it. So it's just huge to have that. And I think what made it more poignant for me, but also like more disappointing, is that like there might potentially actually have been some risk in doing that. Like it wasn't unfounded. So I think what's interesting, right, is like nobody thinks of figure skating as this like bastion of masculinity, where like, oh, like it's such a shock for a figure skater to be gay, but like I think what you were pointing out in the book is that there is a lot of homophobia and stigma around homosexuality in skating.
There's this internalized homophobia, and I found it mostly with like so I mean, you can go to a competition, and one of my friends recently asked me, she's like, okay, if you were competing in a group of 18 people, how many of the people that you were competing against were like out? And I was like, in a group of 18 people in my last competition, there were 2 of us that were gay. Everybody else wasn't. And a lot of some of the officials that you would come across would try to give you pointers and stuff, and some of them, were men and women, and some were gay, some were not, and it was always the gay men the gay judge who would come to me, and they were always the one to tell me to tone it down. They were the ones to tell me to like butch it up. They were the ones to tell me to not skate like a girl, and I think it was out of their own insecurities that things like that happened because of the way that they were treated. But there was also this sort of messaging that like if you were, basically the stereotype, it was like, oh, here we go again. And if there was somebody who was not part of the stereotype, it was like, a big push, because maybe this is an image that'll be more widely embraced. Maybe this will be the thing that doesn't scare somebody away. And so there was like almost this pressure of like not to be who you are, but I also had this overwhelming feeling that I wouldn't be my best unless I was really honest. In skating, you have to perform different characters along with doing all of these elements and tricks, but I felt that I wouldn't be able to portray these characters through myself if I didn't know who I was. So I needed to really express who I was and able to be the best performer and competitor I could be.
So you do that, and you win an Olympic bronze medal. So worked out
Simple
pretty.
as that.
Yeah. So what was that? What was that Olympics?
Thank you to all 3 of you.
So tell us what that Olympic experience was like. Especially, I'm assuming it was.
Yeah, no Olympic fans.
Yeah. Especially, like, I'm assuming it was doubly sweet because you just missed out the last time, and like you defied the odds and you made it.
I remember when I found out I made the Olympic team, and it wasn't this feeling of like jubilation. It was just the deepest exhale I had ever like had in my life. It just felt like, oh my God, I can breathe. It just felt like this huge weight off of my shoulders, because at this point I had already come to terms that if I go or if I don't go, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't define who I am. And I still believe that. And I think it's a mentality that helped me qualify and helped me make it. And I think when I made it to the Olympics and in those weeks heading into it, I just was in a place of being really grateful and just incredibly focused on doing everything I could to like have the best experience possible, which for me meant being in the best shape of my life, meant being so well trained, so ready for anything. And on the flip side of that, it also meant that like, if I were this well-trained, I'd be able to give any interview and interact with everybody and make all of these friendships and relationships while I was there, because that was the whole meaning and the whole embodiment of what it meant to go to the Olympics.
And then you skated incredibly well. And there's a funny moment in the book you're talking about, like, Leslie Jones's reaction and Reese Witherspoon's reaction, et cetera. And you wanted them to think that you were robbed. So you skated flawlessly. And then I think Leslie Jones was like, you were robbed, so.
Yeah, so it worked. So, I mean, I knew that I wasn't the best. Like, I know that I wasn't the best skater that, like, ever lived. on paper. In my own mind, though, I wanted to just give this. Basically, I wanted to give you the Olympic gold medal winning experience, because I realized that the medals were so, based on luck and when you were born and what's going on and what is the thing that is judged most importantly now in this moment in skating. So it's just it's circumstantial. I can't be in charge of those circumstances. You can take any great athlete from some certain period of time and you plop them right into a current day situation and they're not even in the top 10. Not to take anything away from what they are or how they pioneered their own sport, but it makes you think about, they were born at a great time. They had a mindset, and it's all circumstantial. And then I started talking right now, and I forgot what you asked me.
I forgot what I asked you as well, but that was really good context.
Yeah. I wanted to trick people, and and I did that. Yeah.
Well, I think related to that, right, is that I think figure skating is really interesting because there's this sort of tension between the technical aspects of the sport and then the artistry. And it seems like nowadays, the technical aspect is so privileged to the degree of it's just the person that wins is the person who does 7 quads, 8 quads, whatever it is in a performance, irrespective of the artistry that goes into it. And I was wondering if you have any feelings about sort of that balance between technical prowess and the artistic expression components of that.
I think it fluctuates. And I think sometimes there's a really big push on one and then over the other. I also think that in a way that there is this, in skating, the one thing I don't like is that there's always this push where it's the artist versus the athlete. And both of them are athletic, and both of them have, their own style. So, the athlete doesn't have no style, the athlete, and the artist isn't not athletic. But it's this divide of what is basically, especially in men's skating, what is considered more masculine and what is more feminine. And the athlete is always considered to be the stronger person. But it's basically layers and layers upon of something based in misogyny, of masculinity is considered more of a power, and femininity is something considered less than masculinity. So it's all of these layers and layers of misconceptions of how people are perceived in the world and how they are perceived as competitors and athletes. And I think that when you talk about what there's a bigger emphasis on of technique or artistry, I think that yes, it does fluctuate, but I think people sometimes are scared to express themselves. They're scared to show who they are. They're scared to be vulnerable. But being vulnerable doesn't make you weak. It is, I think, a sign of strength. But I think the best skaters, and there's always this case, and I competed against some of those skaters where they combined them both effortlessly. And they looked athletic while doing things so beautifully that gave them this artistic edge as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. You need to be strong in both areas, and you need to portray that vulnerability as well. So yeah.
Is that what you did when you skated?
Yeah, I definitely portrayed a lot of vulnerability. I think the technical component was where I totally fell flat, yeah. Literally as well as figuratively. So yeah. So you do the Olympics, you get the medal, and you're I'm leaving on a high note, right?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You think I was gonna drag my fat ass to another competition after that? Some people are you're gonna retire? And I was duh. Everyone else is 18.
So, you've been on a whirlwind with doing Dancing with the Stars and doing all sorts of guest appearances. What's next for you? What are you thinking about in the next phase of your career?
Well, I can take it from the moment I'm on the Olympic podium. And when I'm on the Olympic podium, I remember so many people telling me that like this is the moment they waited for their entire life. But for me, it just felt like I could see my parents, my mom, so my parent. I could see my mom there, and I could think of my coaches, and I'm like, this moment is for them. When I leave the Olympics, I realized the moment I had been waiting for my whole life was that whole experience of getting to like entertain people. Yes, on the ice, but like also off the ice. And then I've had all of these really incredible experiences post-Olympics where, I'm asked to do a lot of things and people will rely on me to, be quick and be funny in those situations. So I feel like, I've always been that kind of person. I've always been an entertainer. And now I found myself in this place that I always felt like I could be in and always should do. I never thought of a way to get there, but now I see myself as more of like a comedian and entertainer. And, I've just written this book, and then after that, I'll start filming because I just sold a show to Quibi.
Awesome.
And, and now I'm really famous, so.
One thing that's really always impressed me about entertainer Adam is just how self-confident you are and just how unabashedly comfortable you are with being yourself. And what I found so fascinating about reading the book was that there was so much insecurity and anxiety in your childhood life. There's all sorts of silly stories about that. Where did you find that confidence? How did you become the person you are today in that respect?
I think that there are still those insecurities. I think that when I can walk into any rink and for the most part be really well received and really respected. That's my arena. I spent 20 years studying my craft and I have results to back up what I had done. Yes, it may be an old shots. It might be an old shots, but whatever. It might be an old old grocery store, but it doesn't matter. I can go into any world championship or Olympic event and everyone's gonna say that's Adam Rippon. He's a national champion, he's an Olympic medalist. And even though I feel super comfortable doing being up in front of people and speaking and telling jokes and all of that, I know that, I haven't done this for, 20 years. I haven't put the same kind of time in perfecting this side of my, career. So there are still those insecurities, but what I learned through my skating career, which I bring into me entering my 30s, is that you have to act the way that you want to be perceived. And if you are insecure and you hesitate, you will be perceived as someone who is insecure and who hesitates. So you have to act the way that you want to be perceived. And I think one of my favorite things I've ever heard was, Beyonce. She performs. That's it. Yeah. Thanks for coming. So Beyonce knows, one of the best singers and performers of our generation of all time, gave an interview and said that she sometimes doubts and feels insecure when she goes up on stage. How could Beyonce fucking Knowles feel insecure? And she said she makes up this persona, and that persona is Sasha Fierce. So Beyonce might feel insecure, but Sasha Fierce is the person that everybody Sasha Fierce is coming. The C's part for her. And she doesn't miss any note, and she gets everybody in the arena riled up. That's the person that does that, not Beyonce. It's the same person, but she thinks of that person being invincible because she knows Beyonce so well. She knows Beyonce too well. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking Beyonce. And I know me too well. And so when I go into these situations, even though there are those doubts and there are those insecurities, I think Adam Rippon can go and do that. But this Adam, the me might be insecure, but Adam Rippon isn't insecure. So he can do that, and I can separate, and I can almost act the way that I want to be perceived, and I can take that lesson and use it in anything.
So your alter ego name is also Adam Rippon.
It was just easier.
Okay, yeah.
Sasha Fierce was taken.
Works, yeah. So obligatory YouTube promo, you just started your YouTube channel, I think a few months ago. So it's youtube.com/AdamRippon. So I saw some great stuff on there. So you're doing sort of like a break, I think it's called Break the Ice, a talk show interview, but you also do sort of just silly one-off stuff.
You got it.
Okay, yeah.
So I do like this Break the Ice where after Olympics, it was just like everybody I met was like, oh my God, I'd love to go skating with you. And I finally thought like, why don't I just, I can ask them about like how they became successful and what they do as, and all of the things that they've gone through. I could learn about them, but I also give them a skating lesson at the same time. So, they're like, yeah, I saved the world. And they're like, oh. I'm like, yeah, okay. But it's a lot of fun, and I've had so much fun making like videos like that.
Awesome. We'll keep looking out for them. We have some time for audience questions. If anyone wants to come up to the mic and ask a question.
I was wondering who your role models have been, both on the ice and off.
I think, on the ice, I always loved, and I think I grew to love her even more as I got older, was like Michelle Kwan. Because I looked to her and she was still so successful, and in the skating world, so many people look at her and they're like, but she didn't win gold. But if you ask anybody who doesn't know, doesn't follow skating religiously, and they're like, name an Olympic champion, they're gonna go Adam Rippon and Michelle Kwan. And I'm gonna say, hell yeah. I can't tell you how many people have told me like, Michelle Kwan, the Olympic champion Michelle Kwan. I'm like, I'm not, yeah, I guess, yeah. But I really admired her because she just created this incredible career for herself. And she, went on to be one of the best skaters ever. No, she did not win the Olympics, but she's, a 9-time national champion, a 5-time world champion. She's like the Simone Biles of figure skating. And then off the ice, I always admired Ellen DeGeneres. And I really admire her because I think someone who's also an out celebrity in the world, sharing their experiences, she shares her experience of being a gay woman really effortlessly and with such a normality that nobody is given the opportunity to really give their opinion on what they think about it, because she does it so effortlessly and she normalizes it. And I tried to bring that mentality into my daily life in anything I did. Even if I go in and I feel like, maybe these kind of people might not like me, whoever these kind of people are, but I know that I'm cool, and if they don't like me, they're probably fucked up. So, thanks, Ellen.
I guess I also have to note that your book is dedicated to your haters.
Yeah. They don't get enough attention, I know. You get it, yeah. Like the first line in my book is, have you seen that YouTube video where they go to the prison? And you're like, this is making a lot of sense for your book. They go to the prison and it's like the kids meet the inmates and it's to scare them out. And they walk in and the one inmate goes, he's like, you're not that cute. Your hair's uneven and you look dusty. And I was like, that needs to be the opening line in my book. And so it is. It's an inmate talking to a child, and it's very fitting. That threw you off, didn't it? Yeah.
You touched a little bit on the process where the parent has to pick out this coach for the kid, and nobody knows anything. And I feel like it's been in the news a little bit with coaches abusing that power. How do you protect yourself, or how does the parent protect the kid? It seems like such a fraught relationship.
Isn't it scary to think about that?
Yes.
You don't know what you're doing, and especially now, you have to really kind of question who's in charge. I think that the gymnastics scenario really kind of points to that was, Larry Nassar was a doctor. How insane is that? That he was one of the most respected doctors. I think there's such a crackdown now on the role that coaches play. There's such a zero tolerance policy now that I think that in these years since the Larry Nassar trial, that like it's changing for the better, where people are being vetted, and these allegations are taken seriously right away. There's not, like, oh, you just got him on a bad day, or there's like, oh, maybe he was in a whatever. There's no second guessing. We like have to listen to these kids and to these people that come forward. And we need to take these, allegations seriously. And there's a real changing of the tide and of the guard when it comes to issues like that. So I think parents can put their trust back into the system a little bit more. But it is incredibly hard, especially when you don't know exactly what you're doing, and you're trying to make the best decisions for your kids, and then something like this does happen. So it's there's like networks of like parents that get together and you talk about these coaches and stuff, and you try to find the right one. So it's keeping your eyes open and being vigilant to what's happening. And then when you find somebody you trust, you have to just let go and trust them and let them and hope and just trust that they're making the right decision for you and for your child.
One thing I'm curious about as a performer, and like you were talking about 20 years of work culminating in a 7-minute performance or a series of 7-minute performances. And I'm curious, like, what's going through your head 2 minutes, 30 seconds, 5 seconds before you actually start on those 7 minutes? Like, are you just totally let reflex take over? Or?
I can tell you, like, at the Olympics and like everything, like there's this such excitement like the day before. I'm like, holy macro. I'm gonna be an Olympian. Of course, like I had these doubts that like I'm gonna break my foot again and I won't ever be an Olympian. I'll make it so far and then I'll have to like drag my foot out to the rink. Once I got past those, like there's this like excitement, like, oh my God, I'm gonna do it. And then you get ready and you have your practice in the morning and it's all good, and then you get ready to go to the competition, and there's just like this hour where you're warming up and you're feeling good and a little nervous, and then you put your skates on, you have your costume on, and you're like, why do I do this to myself? This is so fucking awful. I feel sick to my stomach. I might diarrhea through my costume. How is this fair? And you go, and against all of that, you get into your like opening pose, and what should happen is all that muscle memory. All of the training that goes in. You're ready for those moments. And I used to be afraid of that adrenaline, but I realized that the adrenaline pushed me to do things that I couldn't do in practice. So when I used the adrenaline instead of trying to hold off on it, I actually performed better than I ever did when I was at home. So of course you go from thinking that you're gonna die and diarrhea yourself to then 5 minutes later being like, this is the best fucking feeling in the world. And you live for those moments right after, because it's like if you can push yourself through something scary, that feeling of elation and accomplishment is so much greater than those feelings of doubt before.
You're really authentic and visible on social media. You interact a lot. How do you balance being an Olympian? Training in any respect takes a lot of focus and a lot of time. How do you balance those sort of two spheres?
I think now it's easier because like I'm not training for the Olympics. But I think when I was getting ready to get ready for the games, I think that like in theory, like athletes are quiet. You keep to yourself and you don't share like your downfalls or your experiences because you don't want your competitors to know that you're like having a rough day. Like I remember there were times where like we have to do these press calls and press conferences before we have like bigger international competitions, and it's for like the journalists. I remember specifically like having moments where I was getting ready to do one of these calls, and I had skated and I had like an awful practice, and I go into the locker room and I'm like, oh no, I can't believe it. And you're like, okay, keep it together. Like, let's just do this call. Let's get it over with. And you're like, I fucking suck. Like, and they're like, Adam, how's it going? Like, how are you feeling? And you're like, I don't think I've ever been more prepared or ready for a moment like this my entire life. I think I'm gonna fucking win. And I was like, I can't do that anymore. I'm like, why do we think that? Like, why do we think that we have to give these canned answers when really, like, nobody listens to them? So I thought that I would answer more authentically, and it actually helped to like share that experience because, you know, I wasn't showing, you know, all my cards, but I was able to kind of like break down that pressure, or that facade I felt like I had built around me, or like an athlete sometimes builds around themselves.
So my question is sort of related to the question, the one before the one you just answered. When you're actually in the competition and on the ice and you hear the music and you're skating, what do you think about? Are you thinking about the routine, like 5 steps ahead? Are you thinking about your mom? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah. So like your heart is beating faster than like it should. You feel like like a million things are running through your head. And the best advice I ever was given was that before you go into a competition, you're gonna choose 3 key words that you will repeat to yourself. And they're the only 3 words you're allowed to say during the whole thing. So instead of thinking like, okay, how am I feeling? Because you can question a million things. You can be skating backwards and you're like, do I feel good? I think I feel good. Oh my God, is my lace untied? Am I like, wait, I can feel like this small itch in my back. Does that mean like the costume's ripping open? Oh my God, I'm gonna have to do the whole thing with a ripped costume open. And you can be thinking all this, but I always chose like, I don't remember exactly what my words were, but it was like power, jump, and breathe. And they were just really simple words, and they meant something specific to me. Like power meant like really pushing, more so than just going fast. My speed didn't matter, but if I were powerful, like I would feel in the ice. Jump meant like get your ass off the ice, like jump. And then breathe meant like, bitch, breathe. And I would only repeat those. And I allowed myself to kind of fall in and out of that focus because it's normal. And sometimes then you put this added pressure of like, I can only say these words. So I remember specifically like, you know, starting my program, and this is crazy, but like you start your program at the Olympics and I'm like, I think Britney Spears like might be watching. And then I'm like, okay, breathe. And then you kind of get started and stuff, and you're like, the feeling is like, it's just every other day. Like you've done this a million times. You know it's not, but it feels exactly like that. Like the faces around you are all the same. And, you know, I remember going into like one of my last jumps, and I'm like, you know, you see those videos of like Leslie Jones, and if someone falls, she's like, why the hell are they falling? Like, get up. And I'm like, I don't want one of those videos out of me like rolling around like a turtle on their shell with like, you know, Leslie Jones yelling at me. Like, that's gonna be my legacy. And so I remember thinking that, and then, you know, right away I'm like, okay, power, jump. And I go back to those words, but you know, there's these crazy things that run through your mind, but it was always like focusing and recentering on these like 3 things that I knew meant a lot to me. So yes, you think crazy shit when you're out there. Things you shouldn't think. Like, I don't think I've ever felt this tired in this moment. You're like 10 seconds in. So it was just focusing on those right things, and yes, you can slip in and out of that, but I always grounded myself with like those just 3 words. It kept it really simple.
Everyone obviously got a chance to see the performance at the Olympics, but I'm more interested in all the hours, all the weeks of training. You know, you're injured, you're hurt, you're sick, you're tired, you don't want to do it. Some elite athletes are motivated by either a fear of failure, others are motivated by the dream of glory. Like, what was it, where did you go when you were tired, you were hurt, you didn't want to train anymore? You know, could you talk about that?
I didn't realize or start to enjoy the training or the process until I was in maybe the last 2 or 3 years of my career. I'd say the last 2, I enjoyed it the most. You know, everybody always says, like, it's about the journey. And you're like, what? You're like, get me there already. And, you know, the training sucks and it's long and it's, you know, you don't want to do it and you're tired and you're exhausted and it's like grueling and like all of those things. But then at the same time, it's like the best thing in the world. Like, what's a better feeling than when you've gone to work and you've pushed yourself so hard and you get so much done and you go home and you're like, yeah, I did that. I'm pretty, like, cool. I'm pretty, like, invincible. And I lived for those moments, and I took it down to, like, living those moments on a daily scale of, you know, I even still do it today where it's like if I have tons of shit to do, like, my best quality is, like, procrastinating and not doing any of them. So I can't wait for, like, a day if you're like, finally, I have a day to get everything done. And, you know, you're busy, you have this day to get everything done, and you don't do a lick of work. And you're like, well, how did this happen? But I'll even write a checklist of, like, get out of bed, brush your teeth, wash your face. Because, like, I get this sense of, like, accomplishment just so I can go check, check, check. And then I can add the bigger things. I can add, like, you know, do this, you know, get this done, write this paper, do this. But, like, I've learned that, like, it was living for those moments every single day where I felt like I could really have accomplished something. Because it's so easy to think, like, I have so far to go, how am I going to get there? But then I remembered, and that's how I learned to, you know, enjoy the process and the journey. Because I had all of these little moments of success that could lead to a big one. And it meant that much more.
So I know you've gotten to do a lot of cool things since the Olympics, Dancing with the Stars. It's going to be really hard to top Talks at Google today. But do you have any?
I can,
yeah, I know. So it's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
But if you were to have a wish list, any wish list items or goals of, like, cool things that you want to do next?
I want to do more things, like, in comedy. I want to do more things and, like, entertain people. It's, like, where I feel like the most myself. And I think that, like, I feel really lucky, and I feel like the circumstances and the things that I get to do now really are helping to, like, prepare me for, like, another, like, career-defining moment. But I want to do more things, and if I can find a job or have, you know, an opportunity to entertain people for the rest of, like, my career, then I will have done something that I've loved every single day.
This may be a gross question, but
Bring it on.
I've heard that since the costumes, the figure skating costumes, are so delicate that you can't wash them. Is that true?
If you're fucking nasty. I have friends that, like, they're like, oh, I haven't washed this costume in whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, take it to a dry cleaner. Like, I was dirt poor, but I had, like, $5 to, like, bring it to a dry cleaner. So I always brought mine to a dry cleaner, but, like, I was the, you know, finally, for the first time in my life, the 1%. And everyone else was like, we don't want to touch these. I'm like, wash your fucking shit. Because, like, every crystal's, like, individually put on with, like, glue, and some of them are, like, airbrushed, and, like, everything is custom made about it. It's, like, the most delicate thing you've ever worn, and you're supposed to do, like, the hardest things you know how to do in it. Yeah. So there's this fear of, like, breaking it, but, like, I was like, I'd rather not smell like a foot.
What surprised you the most about the Olympic experience? And of the celebrities that you met, who has surprised you the most and why?
Okay, so of the Olympic experience, the thing that surprised me the most is, like, it's the biggest competition in your life. And then the thing that shocked me was, like, it's not meant for you to skate well there. Like, they don't set it up so it's like you're in the best, you know, best time, best circumstances, best this. It's set up so that it can just be live in New York. Like, that's it. If you ask, like, any of the mountain sports, like, they, you know, my friends who are skiers, they'll tell me that, like, you know, they will, you know, have to compete in the slalom, but, like, if the weather's bad, like, the event is just canceled, they just don't have the event. At the Olympics, it's like they have the event, it doesn't matter what the weather's like. So these crazy situations happen where it's like people who aren't meant to win. And people who are just so mentally ready, you could just, you know, park a car in front of them, they'll find a way around it. Like, like if they were just like so in that space, like I'm gonna win, I'm just better, they still win, because it's like it takes those two extremes of not expecting anything and just knowing, like, without doubt. So if you have no doubt and no expectations, you do well at the Olympics. And it's everyone in the middle who is like, I don't know what happened. And I had no doubt and I had no expectation. And so I found myself, skating like the best I ever had at the Olympics, because I could see how it was hurting so many of my other competitors. They just weren't ready for anything. And I was. So like, we're in Korea, we have our first practice, it's at like 5:50 in the morning, where it's like, if you think, where do you have to be your most like physically and mentally sharp? 5:50? No thank you, ma'am. And then like 10:30 is like the biggest moment of your life. Every time we compete at a world championships or something, it's like, it's like the prime time. It's, 7, 8 p.m. You've had the whole day to rest, recover, get ready. You haven't been up for like 3 hours. You still have sleep in your eyes. It's a totally different experience. The other thing that was really surprising was like, we're in this arena, and like depending on how big an arena is, it's like sits 10 to 20,000 people. When you're at like a world championships or a national championships, it's a sold out arena. It's like the energy is just wild and it's crazy. It's awesome. You go to the Olympics, only half of the arena is sold out. The other half is all desks, because the whole one half of the arena is set up for every individual media outlet to have a desk. So for every 10 people, there's one desk with one computer. So in a way, it feels like the most empty arena you've ever competed against, or ever competed in. Yeah, you're competing against the arena. It's like me against the music. So you're like in this empty arena that's half full with a camera that is being shot out to like everyone in the world. So you're like, how do I make it feel like I feel like everyone's watching when it feels like nobody's watching and it's 10 a.m. So it was really like, I needed to like make the moment important for me, because all the signs around me were like, it's just practice, like it's not anything important. And it's so, I think like that's what brings like the craziness of the Olympics out, or that like all of these circumstances are so not what you've ever trained for.
I think there was a part 2 of the question around celebrities.
The nicest people that I've met are also the most successful people that I've met. And they treat people the way that you would expect them to, and that's why they're successful. And like Reese Witherspoon is like really nice, and like Taylor Swift, it like shocked me how like normal and nice she was. Like she sat with everyone in the crew she was with, the makeup artists, and the people that she had come in for the music video. And I think like that is a testament to like what true success is that like the way you treat other people is so important, and that's why those people are so successful. And it's something that is like a good reminder of like, no matter what, even if it feels annoying to like treat everyone well, like, oh, what a burden, it's really important, because like we've all been that person that you feel like at the lowest end of the totem pole, and we've all had one person who like probably shouldn't have known our name or known who we were and just said, thank you, that was really nice. And they've singled you out and they made you feel special. And like, if you have that power, you should use it. And it was always the people who were the most successful that used it, and they went out of their way. And it was like shocking, but in a really good way.
Thanks everybody so much for coming.